Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. We'll give people just a minute or so to join us, and then we'll get started. All right. Well, I think I see the counter on my machine has told me that we've cracked the half century, and I think at this point that's an ideal time for us. Yes, I see. Well done, Joe. Raise the bat. Excellent. What a splendid time to start. So, hello, everyone. My name's Peter Duffy, and I'm joined by my colleague Joe McDermott. And welcome to our session on AI-powered resilience in action. A little bit about myself, and then I'll allow Joe to introduce himself. So I'm a director with Battleground, have been for about 4 years. Going way back before that, I was a client of Battleground and worked with our founder, Craig Goldberg, who I know is on this call at the moment. And we worked as in that client relationship, and then we've progressed over the years to a colleague relationship. My focus within the firm is around both resilience and enterprise risk. I've been doing that work for a long time, and I think an important piece in my story is resilience, and the perils of resilience are not just theoretical. If I go back quite some time in my career, obviously when I was a very young man, I worked at Ansett Australia, which is an airline that some of you may recall, and I was there and lived firsthand what happens when resilience goes wrong, and so that was a very formative experience for me. But with that, I'll introduce Joe.
Thank you, Peter, and lovely to be with everybody today. So Joe McDermott, also a director at Battleground. I've been with the organisation for just over 2 years now, but prior to that, had a career in consultancy and also in senior management roles in operational risk and resilience across financial services, energy and utilities. I think, I suppose from my perspective, really passionate about the connection between resilience and risk management, and really how organizations can better prepare for events and better use data to really help them make good decisions during disruption. So really spend a lot of my time working with our regulated clients, APRA regulated clients in that CPS 230 space. And yeah, great to be with everyone today and talking about resilience and risk and how they can connect, and how preparation can drive reduction in cost when the inevitable occurs. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Joe. So to start us off, and if anyone on this call has been to a Battleground session, whether that's a scenario exercise, whether that's been a business continuity planning session, whether that's a training session, you will know that one thing we always do is we always like to start with this slide, our organizational resilience start. And we do that because it's important just to take a minute to anchor concepts and to anchor definition, because we know that in the world of risk and resilience, just like so many other professions, we can get a bit loose with our language, we can get a bit interchangeable with our language. So when we're talking about organizational resilience, we are talking about the 4 fundamental elements you can see in the circles on this diagram. And I'll go through them in turn, starting at the top. So when we're talking about crisis management as the first element of organizational resilience, we are talking about the strategic response led at a senior level to issues, incidents, risks that have the potential to cause harm to our organization, to cause a crisis event in our organization, whether that crisis be of a reputational nature or more broad business disruption. So that's our first element, crisis management, strategic response. If we move around the circle and go to business continuity, now what we're talking about is a disruption to our business processes. We are talking now about the tactical response by working in our business continuity teams and utilizing our business continuity plans to implement the workarounds and to do what we need to do to keep our most critical business processes going for as long as we can to the greatest extent possible. So talking now very much about a tactical business process focused response. If we then go down to the bottom of our diagram, our IT disaster recovery process. So when the screens go blue, when the systems go offline, the whole process of IT disaster recovery led by our IT colleagues, the diagnosis, the containment, and the recovery from an IT disruptive event, that again is its own discrete process. As is the fourth and by no means least important element here, emergency management. That immediate response, that first 5 minutes response, those roles and processes that are associated with responding to someone in peril, to responding to some other emergency event when something's gone bang, when something's caught on fire, that's its own discrete process as well. And then the circle that binds these elements together is the process of communication, be that internal communication or be that external communication. Whatever's playing out, particularly if it's the really bad day when all four of these things are happening at once, those processes of internal and external communication are vital to our response. So that's our picture of organizational resilience, and that's our fundamental elements that we will be referencing to and have in context of the discussion today. That's enough theory from me. Joe, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And look, the focus of today, sort of as it sort of said on the invitation, was about how can software help organizations to be more resilient? How can software help us to prepare for, prevent, respond, and recover to that disruption that is inevitable in the organizations we work with? And I think Peter and I have sort of articulated that we've got about 50 years of experience between us, and across the Battleground organization, we've got many years of experience working in this space. And also we speak with many organizations and clients regularly about the challenges of how can software help us or not help us in looking to be more resilient as an organization. And there's sort of three things that we come back to in terms of key themes around the struggles that we see with many organizations with software and how that can, how it isn't supporting them potentially. The first is integration. So we see a lot of risk management systems, GRC systems, as distinct from emergency management, distinct from potentially crisis. And that sort of end-to-end flow and that ability really to understand what are the things in my organization that could cause me an issue, and then actually to respond to them in real time, but then also fix and track through the fixing. Very challenging to do. Multiple systems, whether it be across risk, technology, those sorts of things. So that lack of integration, a real challenge that we see regularly. I think it's also fair to say that every single piece of risk software and every single piece of software has a focus on users. That's not a challenge. But so often we see a real focus, not so much on, I suppose, to use the cheesy phrase, but I use it regularly, so I'll use it again. It's not about the person in the arena covered in spit and sawdust and managing the risk. It's on the spectators or the coaches. It's the risk teams who are driving the functionality and the requirements of these risk and resilience systems. It's not the people who actually need to use them in a disruption. So often, a great piece of software it'll look great, it'll look really snazzy, but actually when you're trying to use it easily, when the proverbial is hitting the fan, the focus wasn't on those users who are actually going to be managing risk, managing resilience in build. And thirdly, I think there's a lot of confusion about whether a database, here's a list of my BIAs, here's a list of my BCPs. I've got it all produced and there's a repository of it. I'm managing the evidence that I'm managing risk. But actually, it's not so much a system to actually help you manage the risk. It's a system that records data, captures what was known, but when things go wrong, it's a challenge to actually, utilize and bring that together. So those are the struggles that we see, and we hear about them quite regularly. And that's essentially where Battleground Live, which is our integrated risk and resilience software, has been born from. It's not just born from those client conversations, but also born from the consultancy work that we do. So one of the things that we will do in all of our work is we will actually utilize our software to help clients with resilience or risk challenges. So the people who are building it and refining it are using it just as much as people on an everyday basis. So that's really the challenges we're looking to deal with and support clients through. In terms of how we do that, and we'll get into a bit of a use case on this shortly, but it's really about an integrated system that captures at its core, what is it that your organization does? And for anybody who's familiar with a BIA, that's exactly where we're at in terms of what are the things you do, what are the systems, the service providers, the policies that you must comply with. And the reason why we start there is because we know that risk is the impact of uncertainty on objectives. That's fine. We're all fine there. But how do you get to an objective? As an organization, you do stuff. You have processes, hopefully they're clear and understood. You put them through systems. You rely on third parties. So without an understanding of how you achieve an objective, it can be so challenging to really, truly understand what can put you off track from achieving that objective. And similarly, from a resilience perspective, if we want to continue service delivery, being very clear on those services we're delivering, the requirements, absolutely fundamental. So we talk about the operating engine, we talk about the core of the organization, and that then enables us to move in different directions, whether it's to that resilience space, whether it's to the risk space, or to the emergency management space as well, but all built off that really core, deep understanding of what does the organization do. Secondly, really strong focus on building things that are useful for people who actually manage risk every day. I reflect on sort of my career, there being several operational leaders who I would work with and speak with, and they're the people I think of when I'm designing features. They're the people I think of when I think, do we really need this? Because again, if it's not helping an operational leader manage a risk, then is it something that should be in a risk management system or a resilience management system? Question. And then thirdly and finally, focused on making that data useful. How can we connect the dots? How can we connect that information through? So when there might be a disruption to a service provider, can we understand all of the processes that it might impact, all of the objectives that might address? So that philosophy has really helped us build out a system that helps with those struggles and those challenges. So what I wanted to do today was actually step you through a little bit of this integrated system in a structured manner to actually sort of show you, bring some of this to life, I suppose. So one of the things that we often hear about is people want to be able to understand what they do, capture data about the business, what you do, what you rely on, what's most important, to make a plan for a disruption. And then actually that disruption occurs. How do you respond to it? How do you log an incident? How do you respond in real time? How do you track what you're doing to actually address that disruption, whether it be crisis, whether it be business continuity, whether it be emergency, whatever it may be. But then at the end, well, actually, what happened? What was the root cause? How do I prevent recurrence? And being able to do all of this in one seamless flow across a single system helps you be really clear about what are the things I need to improve on? Where do I need to invest? Where do I need to invest today so that I can get the maximum reduction in disruption in the future and connect all of that data back? So that ability to work through that flow in a single system we're really proud of the ability to sort of demonstrate that and show that to the group today. So I'm going to go into that now. What I would say is, whilst I'm working through that, if anyone does have any questions or any areas that you'd like me to explore in a bit more detail, please pop it in the chat. To the extent that I can multitask, which I like to think I'm okay at, but famous last words, to the extent that I can multitask, I'll absolutely try and sort of delve into those areas. To the extent that I can't, we'll pick that up in the questions at the end. But yeah, look, don't feel like you can't just sort of ping a question and sort of hope that I'll pick it up as we go. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to change my screen sharing from the PowerPoint, and I'm going to present I'm just going to present my screen. There we go. So now, just make that the right size. There we go. So this is Battleground Live, and this is the BIA dashboard for Battleground Live. So we're thinking about those modules we described earlier. This was that BIA location. And really one of the critical pieces of Battleground Live is that for every dashboard, for every data element, we make sure that we can filter the data by as much things as possible, really, because we know that, for example, if I'm running a department, I'll have a different view of focus, maybe from somebody who is accountable for a critical operation. Maybe I'll have a different lens from somebody who manages a different service provider or supplier. So filtering on everything by everything, super critical. Now, as we go into the BIA and actually look to capture the data, I think what you'll see as I work through this is the ease of use and the ability to sort of, click and work through. So essentially with our BIAs, we create BIAs for our different business areas. Those can all be added very easily, click of a button, et cetera, et cetera. If we just drill into one of these BIAs, so maybe we'll go into governance, Office of the CEO. So as you'll see, the BIA wizard drives the process for capturing the data about the process across the top. So very clear to follow the bouncing ball in terms of the processes, their criticality, applications and dependencies, relevant workplaces, response teams, and then to complete. And another really critical element of the platform is that as few pieces of data are mandatory as possible. We want to make it easy for people to capture data and not have to worry about mandatory fields. So for example, in this screen, one field is mandatory, the title. Everything else, if you don't know it, well, yes, we want to come back to it later. We can check and challenge, but we can absolutely make it straightforward for people to capture data. Then in those business areas, we go through capturing relevant key processes. Now, those key processes are, we can capture information about those key processes. Let's look at policy updates. Within that, capturing data about the summary and the strategy, the location that it's delivered, whether it's connected to a critical operation. And whilst that's a bit of financial services CPS 230 language, we're absolutely seeing that end-to-end thinking around our important business services or critical operations coming through in several other sectors. So that ability to actually roll a process up to an end-to-end business flow is something that I think we'll be seeing a lot more of and really is crucial from a true resilience perspective. And then the ability to capture process hyperlinks, flowcharts, and that sort of material. Now, again, this is relatively simple and straightforward, and I think the reason why it's really important to show this is that it's the simplicity of data capture, but also the ease of use. So, for example, if we wanted to bring data from one BIA to another, let's say that we're doing a consistent process in two different areas of business, we can simply copy and paste that very swiftly. So it's quite simple and straightforward to capture that data. I'll move through very quickly to the data criticality, which is really where we're talking about how important, how vital is this process to my organization and the ability to capture that information from a disruption perspective. Now, important also to understand that all of this data, again, it can be switched on, switched off, captured easily. But we've also done a lot of work around definitions in terms of capturing different definitions of tolerance levels. Peter mentioned it earlier, language can be such a divide. And if we look at resilience as another example, there's probably 3 or 4 different areas of definition for some of these key basic terms, which I know can cause frustration for people. We've gone through a process of really reconciling and really aligning all of the requirements in our system to meet that. Now let's close out of that. And the last thing I want to show you in the BIA, and there's a lot more to it, but I'm conscious of time and really wanted to show the full end-to-end flow, is the connection to applications and dependencies. And if we think back to that operating engine construct, we think back to that core of the operating engine, which is the process. These dependencies, IT applications, they're the spokes. They're the spokes that really go out to the organization that help us connect what we do with how we do it. So you're able to understand what are my technology applications that I rely on to deliver on this process. But not just that, I can drill in to understand, how critical is that? How vital is that? Who owns it? Who's delivering it? And now that I've got that record of that technology application created and connected to my process, when I start moving into the risk side or I start moving into disruption, I've got these really, really powerful links that can actually help me anticipate disruption, help me anticipate where disruption will flow into my organization. Similarly, with those core dependencies, I've got the ability to create a range of dependencies across a number of different categories. So it could be a different process dependency, upstream and downstream. It could be a third party. And again, so much focus on third party and service provider risk in all sectors at the moment. Being able to understand, is my service provider actually delivering a process or not? What would happen if they were unavailable? So vital. Different teams, different assets, and all of those elements. So really that extensible sort of link of all of these different ways of doing really help you when you then start to try and build up, what are my response plans? How do I respond to a disruption to that dependency or that support piece? And also, what are the risks that might associate with that? So capturing that data is so vital. Now, as I said, I didn't want to go too far through. I'll only stop at one point here before I move on to the plans, because there's a number of other things I wanted to work through. And that is another really strong feature within the platform is the ability to produce from that BIA a business continuity plan at a very basic level. We talk about crawl, walk, run a lot at Battleground. We talk about the need to have the basics in place before you build onto greater levels of maturity and then integrate with more complexity. But the importance of having a minimum viable product at each of those stages. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that whilst we've got a separate plans module within Battleground Live, where you can create detailed plans, you can send them out to your personnel's mobile devices, you can use them to run incidents, maybe that's not where you need to be as an organization, or maybe that's not where your organization is ready to be. You can just simply create a word-based BCP off the back of that BIA as that crawl phase before moving into the walk and greater levels of maturity. So really important that software can support you no matter where you are in that journey. It's no use in having great, amazing, complex features when you might not be ready for them. Okay, so that's that BIA that we've just described. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the plans module. Now plans is where you can start creating the ability to actually have more complexity with those response plans. You can create response plans for each of your different areas, but also where you can start doing things like sending those response plans out to mobile devices of your personnel. So I'm just going to, in a moment, just want to actually bring up my mobile phone, where you'll actually be able to see that sitting on the phone, I've got the ability to access all of those relevant plans or those sorts of things that are associated with me. So just bringing that down here, onto the screen. You'll see here on that mobile device, which we've got sitting up there, I've got the business continuity plan, which I can drill into. I can look at all of the actions that might be associated with that, all of the various different elements or tasks in it, and then drill into all of the subtasks that I might be needed to deliver on. So what this does is this absolutely solves for that challenge of how do I become confident that my business leaders have got the most up-to-date, most relevant plan on their devices at all times. Also, what it does is it makes them available offline. So as long as your phone has synchronized, it will synchronize the most up-to-date data. So the versions on devices will be up to date, will be available for your business leaders, and you can be confident in their provenance. So really powerful in terms of bringing that together. You can also do other snazzy things in the mobile app, which we'll get to, including reporting incidents and also chat and management of incidents. But just showing that those plans, which and that's really that walk element of the phase. With the crawl, you're really able to produce the BIA plans in Word, but as you get to that walk phase, it's that ability to actually run them out across the teams. So again, as Peter indicated earlier, business continuity, crisis, emergency, all of those plans can be captured within the system. And those plans really work to, if we go to the crisis management plan, if we go to the business continuity plan, for those plans, what we're able to capture is the response teams, but also who would be involved externally, emergency services, who our internal contacts would be, all the checklists associated with the plan. So all of those tasks that you might capture in those Word versions. But again, those are all able to be cloned across plans. So if you've got consistent data, you can clone them across the tasks. And then you can also understand which incidents have we actually associated this plan to. So you've got the ability to really create those plans, roll them out to and publish them to your teams, but then also have them absolutely available on the app for your users. Now, that's all the plan and prepare stuff. When there actually is a disruption, that's the other part which is super important. And this is where many risk and resilience systems sort of struggle to talk to each other, because when we think about the concept of a disruption in business continuity terms, we're talking about, well, if it's emergency management, it's the first 5 minutes, it's the whoop whoops, the beep beeps. If it's business continuity, it's the first few hours. They're immediate and they require focus. Whereas if we think about how many organizations often sort of address incidents from a risk and resilience perspective, or risk and compliance perspective, I should say, they're perhaps sometimes on a longer time frame. They're sort of two elements of business response that rhyme, but really connecting them is often a challenge. So we've spent a lot of time working on how we can connect those up effectively within Battleground Live. So I'm just going to show you how that works really, really quickly. So in the risk and compliance incidents module, so this is in the risk module, this is where we capture what we call broadly, or as a capture place for all of our incidents. So let's say that perhaps we've got an incident which is called, I've got customer data on the dark web. Actually, no, I'm going to have to create a new one to make this work. Let me exit that. Sorry, one moment, please. It's going to create a new incident. So again, let's say we've got an incident. Let's say it's customer data on the dark web. Could never happen, but hey, let's go with it. And let's say we want to capture some information about that incident. So perhaps it is, we have been informed that XX, say 100,000 customer records are on the dark web. Okay. Now, what we can do within Battleground Live is really quickly connect that to a resilience incident. So using this feature here, is the incident currently disrupting your ability to operate, and selecting yes, when we save that incident, what the system will automatically do is to say, hey, actually, we need to create a resilience incident over here for you to manage the immediate response. We know that there's going to be some stuff you're going to need to do towards the end, but right now it's more important to focus on the resilience than it is to be on the root cause and those sorts of things. So that's going to take me across to that resilience incident, which it's actually created in the system. So now I can go through the process of managing that incident, through the assessment, checklist, etc., etc. Now, what I can also do, if I want to, is actually create an incident from a mobile phone as well. So let's say I wanted to actually create an incident from my mobile phone, and there we go. I've given out my PII, but hey, not a massive issue there. Quite comfortable with that. Because that's geolocated the system where my phone is. So I can create an incident, and maybe it is we've just got let's say there's some details around water in my home office. You go, typing on a phone is always so much harder. Incident details, flooding, flooding in Brisbane has left water in my home office. Now, what I can also do is if I want to actually take a photo, I can then take a photo. There we go. You can see me taking a photo of my screen again. So I can upload that into the incident. And then I can also, should I want to, fill out some assessment questions, select a plan, and check an initiated incident. I won't do those things, but I can do all of those things to create that incident. And again, that's initiated, and then we're able to. Let's go to next. Next. Select plan details. So what's the plan? I'll choose my business continuity plan. Let's go with BCP example 1. Let's select my team, and then I've created that incident. So what that means is your users can create incidents from wherever they are in a straightforward manner, and that can support whether it be your business continuity, your disaster emergency, etc., etc. So that incident's now being created. In terms of managing the incident within the platform, we're able to run through those. If I go back to all of those incidents, let's go back to the there we go, customer data on the dark web. What we're then able to do is work through the assessment questions, all of those configurable, the relevant checklists, who the contacts are, etc., etc. Now, within the details, when I've created it in the risk module, I will need to go off and actually select a relevant plan. So it looks like it might be a technology BCP. So that will then give me the data that's absolutely required to manage through, and then I'll go back to the incident. So now I've got my plan, the related BIAs, all of that data is now available to me. So let's say that I wanted to actually understand, what's the relevant IT services. I can click through and capture that data that might be associated with it. In terms of tasks and actions, and this is really the critical piece of the plan. This is where I can actually create tasks and actions to respond to the disruption. So perhaps I might create a task. Task might be, maybe it will be inform customers. Maybe it won't be, but let's just go with triage customers, impacted customers. Type into a challenge. Who am I going to give that to? I'll go give it to a team member. I haven't created those, so those won't flow through yet, but I will just save and close that action. So I've now created that task, and that'll then, as you can see, show up in the incident log. So I've got this immutable log of all of the things that have been worked through in the incident. There's also the ability to create a chat with the incident. So many organizations will have a WhatsApp or a Teams or all of those sorts of things, which absolutely we understand can be very straightforward and easy to use. The incident chat within Battleground Live is absolutely contained to the team who are responding, but you can bring other people in, but it's also encrypted end to end and sits within that incident record as well. So you've got that fully, secure view of the incident. So all of that ability to respond, and then you can complete that management of the incident within the system. Yep, we'll mark it as complete. Now, and this is the great piece, still within the same system, we can go back to that incident that we created, and we can actually work through the non-business continuity response. So this is where I can go through and say, for example, what was the consequence? How might that have worked? Now, what you'll also will have seen in some of these modules is what we call radar AI. So sitting in elements of the system are AI-based helpers where you can use what we call radar, which is the AI, to prompt and support you as you go through managing an incident or managing a control or whatever it might be. So essentially what we've done here is what we're looking for support on is often we find that people, when they're inputting incident data or control data, whatever it might be, they may not have a huge amount of training, a huge amount of time, and they don't necessarily put all the information in that they may need to. They may forget things. And even when you put guidance in there, it can be a little bit of a challenge to ensure that it's always completed. But again, you then sometimes get the other challenge where you find that out and review at the end and people say, well, actually, that would have been great to know a week ago when I was managing the incident. So what our radar can do here, and this is in the incident module, is it can actually check what we put in the description and give some thoughts about, well, actually, do we know enough about how we discovered it? Do we know enough about the time frame? Are we clear enough on the data type? Are we clear on what the impact on stakeholders might be? Have we set out any immediate actions or regulatory implications? Have we thought about a comm strategy? Now, those may not all be things that we need to do right now, but I would venture that some of those things being suggested at that point in time can help bring the right people in and can help focus. And as I was talking to Peter about this as we were preparing for the session, I'm really annoyed that Microsoft got there first with Copilot. But what does the Copilot need? They need a radar to really work out what's out there on the field in front of them. So radar is really very much gives you deeper insight into how you can potentially address or manage a risk. Now, I'll just need to save that. We move forward. Now we're going into what I call our standard operational risk or compliance risk. Sorry, just take a bit of water there, otherwise I will not get to the end of this. Our operational risk and compliance risk assessments and connections. So this is where we'll do things like assessing the consequence of the risk. It sounds like it's probably going to be high. It's probably going to be customer. It's probably going to be data. I'll think about whether I could have a material financial impact. Well, probably yes. Could it impact a critical operation? Maybe I don't know. Could it lead to a reportable complaint? Well, yes, that's probably a yes there as well. So what these fields are doing is they're just helping us understand who needs to be brought in, who can be brought in to help us manage or respond to this incident. And this is very much in that assessment phase. We'll then give ourselves an incident owner. We won't notify them. We'll just progress it forward. And then, and it's always going to do those check and saves. Now, this is, again, where we're seeing the system come back together and connect itself up. And there's probably only a couple more things that I wanted to show in the system, and this is absolutely one of them. Because this is where we're now saying, in this incident, what were the relevant processes? And those will take those across those, let's say it's customer, we'll put it across data protection. There we go. What was the relevant policy? InfoSec. Were there any service providers that might have been involved in this? And any IT applications? So let's say maybe there's a customer help software. Now, because we've connected this incident into all of those different elements across those spokes, what we're now able to do when we're going through to manage the incident is better understand root cause, better understand where there might be implications of future actions, and it really helps us drill into, well, if we've got an incident here or an issue there, what are all the other things that might be relevant to that? So that connection out at this stage will also, as you can see, drive who's involved in the team. Because essentially what we're saying is these people, Ray, Ali, and my testing profile, have been allocated as the owners of those resources. So that means that they're going to be brought in. And that's really important because so often people aren't necessarily brought in, or the system doesn't help us bring the right people in at the right time. So what that's able to do is bring that in, connect those dots. So we'll save, regress. Now, we're going to contain and respond. So actually, we're going to work through and say, do we need to do anything to address the incident? And this is, again, well, we know that there's a resilience incident connected, so that's okay. But if at this stage we found that actually, gosh, we need to connect it up with another incident, then you'll be able to do that at this stage. We're able to track all of our contain and response actions. And then once we confirm that it's fully contained and responded to, and I'm just going to work through that because there's only one thing I wanted to show you, is what we'll do is go to a review phase. So what the review phase is, where we can connect it back into root cause analysis and also be able to track and link all of this data together. So we've got all of these linkages that we made earlier. Now, it might be that actually, we realized that actually it wasn't associated with that service provider. We can change that at this stage, and we can connect it to another service provider. So just because we thought it was at an earlier stage associated with one, it doesn't mean we're locked into that. Similarly, if we thought it related to a certain policy, but actually, gosh, now we've found out that it was actually related to another one, we can add that in. So all of that can be edited at this stage once we know what actually happened. We then complete our assessment. Again, we can reassess. We can alter that assessment. We can say, actually, there was some reputational damage that occurred here as well. Now, maybe the incident wasn't as bad as we thought it was. Maybe actually we thought it was 100,000 customers and it ended up being 10,000, and there was a reason why that was. Now, what we can actually do is we can connect, we can say, well, could the consequence have been significantly worse? Well, yes. How bad could it have been? Well, it could have been high. And then we're asking people to capture what stopped it from being worse. Now, why do we ask that? So that we can understand what worked. What controls actually operated to prevent the consequence from being more severe? Maybe it was, if we search for that, there might be some sort of data validation. So that control is operated to prevent our loss being as great as it could be. And again, that's super insightful data that we can use to help us actually improve risk management over the future, because we now know this control is super important. And really, the story I sort of talked to you about this was that there was a real experience where I had when I was in a senior management role in banking, and we did have one of those, oh bananas moments. We had the bad people in the system doing the bad things, and it ended up not being that serious, which was great. And we're doing a PIR, and there were all sorts of hand wringing and baying and gnashing of teeth and all that sort of stuff. How bad? And the one question I asked in the PIR was, we're all still here. It wasn't a catastrophe. Why? And often that question just isn't asked. We don't compare our situation to, as being a positive situation. It's always, so this is really prompting that question, driving some really great data, because again, this can help you understand value of controls. We can work through our customer impact. We can work through our financial impact. Maybe it was, $100, $1,000, whatever it might be. We can work through our compliance impact. Who did we need to notify? Did we notify them? We haven't set those up here, but who would we need to notify, and those sorts of things. Save. Go to the next one. And we can now do our root cause analysis. So let's say potentially we've got a root cause analysis like third-party security failure to, maybe that's what we've written down. Now, again, radar can be a super help here in actually checking and challenging, have we got a comprehensive root cause analysis? What have we described? What might it look like? We can also address, now, and it gives us some ideas, here are some potential other root causes. Now, these are based on, again, what we connected it to. So it's come up with backup management protocols. That's because that was a process that we actually linked this incident to. It's come up with policy non-compliance because that's something we've connected it to. So it's bringing this back in to really check and challenge. to make sure that we've got all of those things considered in that root cause analysis. We can then do a standard sort of hierarchical root cause analysis should we wish to. We can also understand what were the controls that failed, maybe it's backup systems, and then we can also drive reevaluation of the effectiveness of those controls if we need to. We can also drive associations with risk classes, with IT Ops, InfoSec. We could reassess the risk appetite or the risk rating if we needed to. And we can also create action plans. Or, and this is again another really important piece, we could connect this incident with an action plan that's already going on in the organization. Because it might be that this incident is actually, not something new. So why would we necessarily create a new incident? So in this situation, I've just connected it up with that existing action plan because that's enabling us to effectively address that risk. All right, so I'm going to save that. And then the final piece is simply the incident closure. And this is, again, where the person who's owning that risk an incident, they can see everything in one place as they're making that sign off and approval. So essentially what we've been able to do is work through that process from understanding what it is that we do, creating plans to address and respond to disruption, the actual response, but then not just the completion of the response, but then the review and the follow-up and the improvement of the risk, the management of the risk. I think one of the things you'll hopefully see as you work through this, as you see this, is there's so much of our focus. Our focus is on the policies, the service providers, the tech applications, the processes, because those are the things that people actually manage. Those are the things that you actually use to manage risk every day. And that's such a vital element of the platform, bringing it into real language that business leaders use every day. So with that said, I did want to leave some time for questions or drilling into anything. So I will stop sharing and perhaps actually bring up the slides again. I will just bring that up, and we can take any questions as we may need to. So Peter, whilst I'm doing that, do you want to check?
That was splendid, Joe. And so we'll give people a moment to formulate their questions, and there's many of us still on the call, so please use the chat or the raise hand button. And while you're formulating those questions, I was just going to share a couple of reflections as we went through on a couple of system elements that I think were touched upon that I always find really important, and that's to go back firstly in the setup. The configurability of this system is one of its real strengths. You would have seen on the way through risk tables, you would have seen different settings for process tiering and for maximum tolerable periods of disruption and all those things. It's all configurable, which I think is a real strength. The other piece, when we were going through the incidents that I know is often discussed as a real strength, is the keeping of records and logs that comes with managing an incident through this system is something that, particularly if the nature of your incident is one that 2 or 3 years down the track, you're preparing to go to speak at the inquest, at the inquiry, in the court case, to have those contemporaneous records and systems that supported that, that's gold in those circumstances. So I know they're two things that I always reflect on as real strengths of the system.
Thanks, Peter. And we've got a great question from, I think, Connell Wood. So I'll just read that and give a response. And there's also been some questions in the chat, a lot of it around AI. So the first question, this was picked up in the chat from Michelle, but I'll just reconfirm it for everybody, was where does the AI's learning come from? Is it based on internal data, external sources, etc.? So it learns from the data in the system only. All the data remains within Battleground, so we don't store it in the model itself. But in terms of how much is it beholden on a third party, so yes, it is. We do utilize a third party AI for the responses. It's really interesting actually going through this journey. So one of the things that we did create when we started building out the platform and recognizing that AI was going to be such a game changer was some really, really clear principles around AI, not just in the usage perspective, but also in terms of how would we work with service providers. So one of the things that we've developed the system is that it can leverage from multiple different AI models. So we are not beholden to a single model. And I think that's probably the important piece is I don't know right now whether, OpenAI or Google or Microsoft or whoever else has come up is going to win the AI race. From our perspective, it's really important that we anticipate all of those things and really be as open as possible in what we're working with. Are we going to have to pay a lot more to use whatever systems are left? Look, I think like anything, where you see huge amounts of capital flowing in those early phases, the cost and the dynamics may change over time. I have a personal sort of positive view, which is I think that Moore's law is still going to continue to operate, and while there will be control by a smaller number of parties, processing capacity and those sorts of things will continue to grow. But yeah, look, it's absolutely something that we watch closely. But with that said, at the moment we are able to work with multiple different AIs and also not seeing the cost as being a material issue. So next question. When you complete a process, you're able to create an executive and board summary that exports? Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that we didn't show is the ability to produce Word reports in very snazzy, very simple ways. So yes, there is a button that you can click, and that absolutely flows that. In terms of the incident process, there was actually also an incident process report that you can run out as well. So yeah, absolutely, all of those things are available.
So Joe, just on that last question, just the Friday just gone, I had a client ring me. What they thought was a verbal update to the board or to the board audit and risk committee had suddenly become a paper, because that's never happened to any of us on no notice. And we spent 20 minutes on the phone together in the system and populated the data that was needed. Problem solved.
Yep. All right. And next question. The understanding of business continuity of ISO. So the ISO 22301 is much broader than our description, and I'm assuming we're talking about the description in the here in the resilience space. Yes, because it has that broader definition of a business continuity management system. And do we see value in? Look, absolutely. I think what we're trying to depict here on this resilience star is those critical elements of resilience and response, and particularly how they distinguish between crisis, BC, IT, et cetera, of which there are, several international standards. There are several different institutes and those sorts of things. So it is intentionally something which is at summary and high level, but draws those distinctions out. But yes, Warren, 100%. We need to protect against the, prepare, prevent, respond, recover. Those are the words we talk about every day. And I think what the system, as we've just demonstrated, shows is we've got that full end-to-end life cycle. So it's the preparation and understanding what you do. It's the prevention through the controls and the processes. We didn't go through the risk management system in a huge amount of detail, but we absolutely have that. There's the response through the incident response and recover through the incident response, but also then into the prevent again through continuous improvement. So I think there's absolutely alignment between 22301 in its broader sense and the system that we've sort of described as well. Okay, I think that's just a positive piece of feedback from Canal, appreciating the formalized process post-incident. Yeah, Incidents aren't learned from, and I think that's absolutely one of the things that we go back to those pain points. If I just sort of go to those pain points, because many resilience and risk systems aren't integrated, you lose that loop, so that the PowerPoint, gets disconnected because breathe, we're out of it. Okay, we might do a PIR, but where do the learnings from the PIR go? They go somewhere. So this connection piece, really sort of super important to us. I was going to say, Peter, did you have any closing comments or thoughts that you wanted to share with the group, or anything that you wanted to add?
Look, I think the only thing I really want to add at this stage, and Joe, I might just ask you to kick along to our last slide. You'll see the QR code there between those two dubious fellows. Please take a moment to scan and find out more. I've really enjoyed being part of this session. It's been a great kickoff today for what's going to be a great week of events, and I hope we see many of you at other similar seminars during the course of this week. But otherwise, thank you so much for participating today.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you all. And just want to say thank you to the RMIA as well for arranging this session and the whole week. So yeah, look forward to seeing more of your faces and hearing more of your thoughts. And yeah, look, I think just thank you very much and have a great week.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.